Note that you will need these build tools also when you're developing an application locally, not just for building an application once you're done developing, because you need to run the application locally as well, right? So you need those dependencies to be installed before you run the application locally. These tools also have commands to execute tests, for example, to run the tests locally, as well as publish an artifact to an artifact repository, and so on. Maven and Gradle, they both have their own dependencies file, where the dependencies and the versions of those dependencies are defined. So again, if you are writing a Java Spring Boot application, you have Java classes, you have Spring Boot classes, you have some libraries for working with the database, for authentication, and so on. So all these are dependencies for your code. And for Maven, they're managed in the pom.xml file. So this is where all the dependencies are listed. And for Gradle, it's the build.gradle file. And where do those dependencies actually come from? They come from the repositories. Gradle and Maven use the same dependency repositories, like Maven repository, Maven central repository, to find those dependencies and their versions and download them from the remote repository to local repository. So this is how it works. Let's say you need a new library to connect your Java application to Elasticsearch. You find a library for that, you find a dependency with the name and version, you add it to the dependencies file and the dependencies list to install the dependencies, and it gets downloaded locally in a local Maven repository. So the tool knows not to download dependency every time you refresh because it has a local copy where the downloaded dependencies and their versions are stored. And with both Maven and Gradle, when we execute build commands or package command and we build a jar, it actually automatically downloads the dependencies of the project. So all of these dependencies will be downloaded first and then the application will be built. So we don't have to execute that separately. But when working with code editor like IntelliJ, for example, and if I add a new dependency, for example, a Mongo driver, which we don't need, but just for a demonstration. And if I add it here, I can just refresh my Gradle here, and it will start downloading that new dependency. In the same way, if I add such a dependency to Maven in the pom.xml file, so let's add a dependency. And just like with Gradle, if I click on the Maven toolbar here and refresh my project, IntelliJ will go ahead and start downloading the new dependency that we have just added to the pom.xml file. So most of the editors actually detect that you have added a new dependency to your dependencies list. And if it's not already locally available, it will actually prompt you to refresh the dependencies. And that's how developers would usually do that, because they won't build an application every time they need a refresh or downloading of a new dependency. And locally, those dependencies will actually be in your home folder in .m2, that stands for Maven, in this folder. And here you see repository, and here are all the dependencies that we have downloaded. So that's basically the local repository.